Hi, I'm Beth from Sew Country, and today's tutorial is for the Evelina tote. This is from Backstitch and Baste. I am really enjoying working with Backstitch and Baste patterns. I feel they just come together in a very simple way, but they still create beautiful, unique bags, and I think that they are great for beginners, but also allow you to have a lot of room to have some creativity and just make an overall fun sew. This is a pattern I've sewed several times, and there's a couple of reasons why. One thing is there's not a lot of pattern pieces to cut out, so you can cut it and have it prepped and ready to go quickly. 2, it showcases fabric beautifully. And 3, there's several different options, whether you want to do a front slip pocket, which is the easiest way in my opinion, a clear vinyl front pocket, or even a zippered slip pocket. So because there's those different options, you can showcase whatever materials you want. I personally prefer to use a panel and do the slip pocket option just because it's quick and easy. But I have seen a lot of people do wonderful embroidery on this front slip pocket. So if you're not in her Facebook group, consider joining so you can get some creative ideas on how to use this front pocket to make just a beautiful, unique bag. I'm using cotton canvas and a vinyl in this pattern. My cotton canvas is going to be uninterfaced, which means I'm not going to add any medium weight interfacing like an SF101. My vinyl is a very thin vinyl. It's a cheap vinyl that I've had for years, and I'll be using up the last of it in this pattern. I'm not adding anything to the back of that. Since I'm not adding any interfacing, I will choose to use foam as a stabilizer just to kind of help make sure it's a sturdy enough bag for me. This panel and my main print are both from K&A Custom Fabrics. This is their After Dark side of their company. They have the original and then they have the After Dark. This is from the After Dark. There's 2 separate Facebook groups for them. So this is where that print comes from. For the lining, it's going to be from Jubilant Fabric. Let's go ahead and talk about all the pieces we'll be using today. For my front slip pocket, I'm using this panel. This will be the exterior, but I'm also going to have a lining for my front slip pocket. Again, no interfacing on any of these. I am going to have 2 side panel pieces. These will need to be mirrored. As you can see here, they are mirrored. I have mine cut out of vinyl very thin, so I will be adding the foam to these. This is my center panel piece. This is what that slip pocket will attach to, and both of those side panels. This is going to be the base. You will need a base for your exterior. This is going to be the back of the tote. So for the back, I've already added my foam to it. For the front, I have not added the foam yet. For the front, I'm going to construct it with that slip pocket, the center pocket, and the 2 side pieces. After I get that all sewn up, then I will add the foam. Of course, you could add the foam individually if you wanted to. I just find it's a little bit easier to do it after it's all done. So this is the back piece with foam already attached. Here are my lining pieces. This is cut out of 1 pattern piece, so it's really easy. You just have your 2 lining pieces. There is pattern instructions to add a pocket. I'm not doing it. I've done lots of pockets and I just want to keep this one kind of simple, but just know you can add slip pockets or zipper pockets or anything you want on these lining pieces. You can see they're pretty big, so there's plenty of room to kind of get a little creative inside here. The only other thing I'm going to use is I'm going to use some webbing for my straps. The pattern does tell us that we can add a magnetic snap to this. There's times that I've added magnetic snaps as a closure. There's times I've just skipped it, and this one I'm going to skip it. But just know that you can definitely add that magnetic snap if you wanted to. Let's go ahead and work on this front part first. I'm going to show you the way it's going to look at the end, just so you kind of have some understanding of it, of how it all comes together. This is the way my front will look. It's going to be so cute, and I'm so excited to get it sewn up. But it comes together really quick, and then after you get this, you're basically just constructing it all together at the end. That's why I love this pattern. It's just a really fun way to sew a bag with gorgeous prints. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 2 slip pocket pieces, place them right sides together, and then I'm just going to sew across the top with that seam allowance given in the pattern. I'm going to have the pattern and the fabrics all linked in my description, just so you can find them if you want to get your own. I'm going to backstitch when I start and stop and just sew across the top of this slip pocket. I'm just going to open these 2 pieces up and I'm going to finger press. Of course, if you want, you can take it over to the iron. I'm just being a little bit lazy and going to do it this way. After I finger press those, then I will just flip that exterior down, making sure I roll my seams to get a nice smooth finish, and then I'm going to top stitch across the top about 1/8 of an inch away. I'm using contrasting thread today, which I'm a little nervous about because I'm not the best in sewing straight, but hopefully it'll be okay. We're just sewing across that top edge where we just sewed about 1/8 of an inch away. Now we're going to take that center pocket piece and just lay that slip pocket right on top, matching up those sides. I'm going to add just a clip or 2 just to make for sure it doesn't shift too much on me while I'm sewing, and I'm just going to baste around the 3 corners, of course not basting the top, just so it stays nice and open. When I baste, I'm just doing 1/8 of an inch away, but I am going to go ahead and backstitch just so I don't have to worry about it unraveling, even though I'm going to take it immediately and sew on the sides. It's just a good habit to get into. Now that you have that base in place, you're going to go ahead and take one of your side pieces here. Of course, you're going to want those 2 parts to match up there at the top. So when you have it like this, orientated the right way, then you'll just flip it over, have it right sides together, and I'll add just a clip or 2, and then I'm going to sew down this seam with the seam allowance given in the pattern, and then I will repeat that same step for the other side. Before I add the other side, I'm just going to open this up, press that flat, and then I'm going to top stitch on the side panel so that seam will be right underneath. So instead of like flipping the seam, I'm just going to leave the seam straight up and then lay that side panel on top. So when I do this top stitching, it'll be 1/8 of an inch away from that seam I just sewed, and will be through both the vinyl on the side and the seam allowance. I'm going to go ahead and do those same steps to attach the other side panel onto this front pocket. You can see because my vinyl is so thin, I even have some wrinkling here. That's how thin this vinyl is. Like I said, I would not buy this again, but since it was in my sewing room, I wanted to go ahead and use it up. Thankfully though, I will be able to add foam to this, and that will stabilize it really nicely. So now I have the front of the bag finished. I'm going to set this aside, and I'll go off camera and cut out foam and fuse it onto this piece, so there will be fuse on the front, the back, and the base of this bag. But before I do that, I'm going to pull out the back and show you the next steps. So let's pull out the back of the bag. I'm going to deviate from the pattern just a little bit here, and instead of adding my base next, I'm going to add my straps or handles next, and then I'll add my base after that. I'm using webbing for mine, but you could definitely use your material to make your own straps and handles if you would want them to be matching, or if you just want to do that. What you'll want to do is you will just want to center them into this little spot above. Definitely have an overhang there. The pattern tells you how much of an overhang you want to leave, and this is just for added security so that you don't have any problems with these pulling out. Make sure that your straps or handles do not get twisted. We definitely want to have them so that they are finished properly here, and you can just kind of fold them flat to see that these are not twisted. What I want to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and baste these in place. So now that I have these attached, I'm going to flip this up, and this is why the pattern recommends you don't add them first, because you could accidentally get them attached below, but I just find it easier to do this for me. So I'm just going to have those out of the way. I'm going to pull out that base piece. You can see that I did keep the foam out of my seam allowance just to help me a little bit. I am going to place that base right sides together. That long edge of the base will match the bottom of this back panel piece. I'm going to clip this, just add a couple clips here, and then I'm going to sew this with the seam allowance given the pattern. I will sew this the exact same way to the front. So everything I'm doing to this back, I will do to the front, adding the straps and adding the base. I'll do those steps off camera after I add the foam to it. So let's go ahead and add this base just by sewing down that straight long edge with the seam allowance given in the pattern, making sure you backstitch when you start and stop. You're going to need to top stitch on this bottom part. I'm going to choose to butterfly the seams and top stitch on both of them, but you can definitely choose whichever way you prefer. It is kind of a personal preference at this point, but for me, I'm just going to butterfly them open and have one going one way and top stitch down both sides of that seam. So this is what the back and the base look like for right now. I'm going to go off camera and get my front finished with the foam attached in the handles, and then add it to the bottom here as well, and then we will come back and finish this exterior. So I finished my front exterior and I added the straps to it, and I also attached it to the base. And this is really big, so I know we're not going to get to see everything on the camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this right sides together. So I'm simply going to take the back and clip it to the front. I'll start here at the top and put all these handles down in place. If I find that the seam there at the bottom is not matching perfectly, I might shift around a little bit, but I'm just going to start clipping here. So you are going to sew straight down. You're not worried about anything with the corners just yet. And I know you're like, wait, we got to box the corners. Nope, this is the right step. So go ahead and clip those in place. And then we're going to sew from the top all the way down with the seam allowance given in the pattern. So now that you have that side seam sewn, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a mark here to show where that center spot is. So this marks that center at the bottom. That's the first thing I do. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a diagonal slit here. I'm going to make a cut. So you can see my stitches there in the blue. I'm just going to make a cut there, and that's just going to kind of reduce some of that bulk is what it's mainly doing. I'm going to open up the bag. I just stick my hand in there, and what I want to do now is to get this seam from the side directly on that line that I drew. So you're just opening that, pressing it flat, and we'll go ahead and lay the bag down really good so you can see it. But here is that side seam, there is that bottom mark. You can see they're directly on top of each other. So now that you have it like this, the pattern tells us how far down we're going to sew. You can draw a line on there, or if you have that mark on your seam guide, you can do that. I'm going to draw a mark off camera so that, you know, just for integrity of the pattern, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so I use that measurement given in the pattern. I measure from this point right here. So I put my ruler right here, measure back. You can see that's a straight line. Now all I do is I sew directly on that straight line. I make sure I back stitch when I start and stop. Now that you have that line stitched, all you do is cut off this extra, and that is your boxed corner. And you can cut pretty close. I'm just going to probably give myself about 1/4 of an inch. Cut that off, and then I'm not going to flip it because I still got to do the other side, but you can see that's your typical box corner of how it looks there. So a different way of doing it, but it's really unique. I like that. And I do find that you get like a little bit of a straighter cut this way. You don't have to worry about like making sure those box corners match up. So I'm going to repeat those same steps on this other side, sewing down the side, then boxing the corner. You will take your lining pieces and you'll put them right sides together and sew down the sides just like you do the exterior. So now I have the lining placed right sides together. I've sewn down both sides right sides together, and then I went ahead and came in on the bottom and just left an opening here. This is the exact way the exterior would look, except we'd have that base. You don't need to mark those centers on this one because these seams are the centers. So you're just going to again open up these seams, place them right on top of each other, and then you're going to use that measurement given in the pattern. You get this all flattened out here so you can see it easily. And so then you'll just use that pattern measurement and you'll draw a line, and then you'll sew right across here the same way we did with that exterior to box the corners on the lining. I wanted to come back and show that since there's not a base on the lining, just to make for sure you understood that it's the same way. The seams are going to be directly on top of each other. And I'm going to butterfly both of them open when I sew, and then we'll just trim it off. So you can see they're on top of each other there, sew across, and that will box the corners on that. Make sure you leave your opening in the lining, and then we will leave our lining wrong sides out, but we'll turn our exterior right sides out, and we'll come back and put them together. I have my lining sewn with the corners boxed and an opening in the bottom. I have my exterior sewn, both corners boxed, everything attached. Now what I need to do is I simply take my exterior, it is right sides out, and I take my lining and I'm going to slip that exterior into the lining. I'm going to start by taking the straps here and slipping them down inside on both sides. Then I'm going to match up these side seams and put a clip in place there. And I will start easing this bag all around the top, and that's going to be the edge we're going to sew. After we get this clipped all together, we will use a bigger seam allowance. The pattern tells you to use a bigger seam allowance on this final sew here, just to make sure you get everything attached, and so you can catch this part. If you want to rivet that strap down, you can do that. You can see these top parts match up perfectly. If they don't, you can kind of pull things around or move them around so they match up really nicely. And if there's a little bit of shifting, the seam allowance is big enough so that it won't be too much of an issue. Okay, I have everything clipped in place, and so now I'm just going to sew everything. I'm going to lift up this top part, slide it in, and then just go all the way around this. You're going to want to go a little bit slow because there is some kind of tight curves here. It's not hard to do, but you just don't want to rush this step, so you make sure you can do the curves in the front and the back, and then you can also get really nice points around where your straps are. I'm not good at sewing a bigger seam allowance, and so I am struggling a little with keeping mine perfect. If you're someone like me that struggles a little bit with a bigger seam allowance, you can always draw it on so that you keep that proper seam allowance. I'm just rotating the bag as I need to so that I can have a straight line to sew over. Now I'm just going to pull everything through this opening, and I did notice that this vinyl I use, like I said, it's a cheap vinyl, and I did have some wrinkling on it. I may have to try to use a warm iron and try to kind of just help those wrinkles come out. Definitely making sure I'd use a pressing cloth, of course. I'm not trimming down any of my seams. If you wanted to, you could trim those down, but I'm just leaving mine long. If you do choose to trim them down, just make for sure that you definitely don't trim them down around the webbing. We want to leave that webbing long. That gives a little bit of integrity, and also it leaves a place to rivet if you choose to rivet. Now I'm just sticking my thumbs in here, pushing this out. I'm going to give just a light tug. I don't want to pull too hard. We don't want to cause any unnecessary ripping or pulling. I'm going to find my stiletto, kind of get those corners really nice and sharp here. That one looks good. Okay, that one looks pretty good. Definitely would want to have kept the foam out of there. That was my fault. I decided to leave it in, but that does make it a little bit bulky. But the thing is where they're all going to be the same. They'll all look the same. So it'll take a while to get all these corners poked out, but you'll just go around and poke them out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm also going to roll down the seams. Whenever I look at the bag from my exterior, I really don't like to see the interior poking through, so I always try to get it just a little bit lower. But we are going to top stitch around the bag one more time, and we also have to close up that opening in the bottom of the lining, and then our bag is completely done. Okay, so now I have all of the webbing corners poked out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull that and kind of roll those seams and put some clips all around here. This part I do feel is very important to take your time on here, because you really want a nice finished edge. You want everything flat. If you need to take over the iron, you can, or you can just finger press. But we want to be able to kind of get a nice sew all around this part. If you have any bunching trying to happen, this is the time to go in that opening and kind of smooth things around. I know this vinyl on the sides is a thin vinyl and it's prone to maybe tearing or ripping. So I'm going to pull out these clips. They're heavy duty clips, but where they have that rubber on the end of it, it'll kind of help protect so I don't have any like tearing or even any indentions that are really bad, like sharp little pokey holes in it. It'll be a little bit easier for the vinyl to not be damaged, I think. So I'm going to put those there. We are ready to do those last final sews on this bag. I went ahead and clipped the bottom closed. Now I clipped the lining closed after I'd already gotten everything clipped around there, because I like to use that opening if I need to roll my seams any. But I'm going to go ahead and sew this first and get this part taken care of, and then I will top stitch all around the bag. I'm going to choose to top stitch from the wrong side, but you could easily flip the bag wrong sides out if you did not want to do that and prefer to top stitch from the right side. Now that the lining is complete, go ahead and tuck it in just to kind of get it out of the way. Let's go ahead and start here in the middle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide everything under there, and I'm going to make sure that my lining is just about a 1/16 to a 32nd of an inch away from the exterior. I just don't want it to poke through, so I'm just going to have it slightly underneath. I'm only going to take off a clip or two, and I'm going to go really slow. Let's get that strap out of the way. So I have finished my Evelina tote from Backstitch and Baste, and it looks adorable. I did use some vinyl that has some wrinkling, but that happens sometimes. It's just a cheaper vinyl, but other than that, it's beautiful. Here is the front. I used a panel, and this is a slip pocket here. Here is the back, just with that print from K&A. The panel's from K&A as well, and it is gorgeous. It is available for pre-order right now. The link will be in my description. The inside is a print from Jubilant Fabrics. Now, I don't know if that print's still available. I actually bought it at SME. last year, so I don't know about that. But other than that, I'll have the link for the pattern as well. This is a fun, quick pattern. This pattern is written so your front pocket here can either be a slip pocket like mine, a clear vinyl pocket, or even a zipper slip pocket, so you have some options. I think it's perfect for panels. If you're someone that likes to get panels and a coordinating print, it just works out perfectly. But anyway, thank you so much for watching another one of my tutorials. I hope you have time today to just sew up something fun and quick with beautiful fabrics. Thanks so much for watching, and you have a great day.